Welcome to the Ignite the Day podcast hosted by RHEMA UK and Ireland. Igniting your day with revelation, inspiration and encouragement, helping you to live the life that God has called you to.
Hello and welcome to the Ignite the Day podcast. I am Toby Avery and I have with me today Mark and Simone Walker, pastors of GoChurch in Manchester. And it's a real pleasure to have you guys with us today.
It's so good to be with you. Really excited to have this conversation, and it's great.
Yeah. Likewise, and you know, Mark and Simone, you guys are awesome. You know, we've known each other quite a while now, and I know we're going to have a fun little chat today. And if we aren't laughing at some points during the chat, something will have gone drastically wrong. So everyone, you're going to have to come along with us on that journey. But we're going to explore a little bit of Mark and Simone's life, their story, where they've come from, and where they're going with GoChurch. It's really exciting what's happening in GoChurch in Manchester. So I'm really keen to dig into that shortly. But why don't we start, Mark and Simone? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, what your history is, what your background is, what your connection to RHEMA is, and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, where do we start? So I grew up in Sheffield, originally part of a Christian family, and really had a relationship with the Lord from a very, very early age. Came over to Manchester in 1997, so 28 years ago now, which seems incredibly long time ago. And I came here because God really redirected my life. There's a massive story behind that, which we haven't got time to go into, but God brought me over here, real calling to come to Manchester. And I joined with the Kingdom Faith Manchester Church, which was led by Pastor and Claire Morton. And I think I came sort of the third Sunday after it kind of officially started. So right back at the very, very beginning, I was a young 18-year-old, thought I knew it all. Probably still do think I know it all at times. But,
no comment.
I got involved with them, and God had really called me to come over here, and had also told me that I was going to be part of that church and also be the worship leader in the church as well. And so over the next period of time, I really got very heavily involved in worship and worship leading with them. When I finished my degree, I went down to the Kingdom Faith Bible College down in Horsham, which is where I met with Jesus. And I met Simone. The rule in the Bible college was you weren't allowed to fall in love with anybody except for Jesus. And
you broke the rule.
And I broke the rule. And I'm not really a rule-breaking type of person.
That's very true. Yeah.
So that's where I met Simone. So do you want to say your part of today?
Well, I'm the complete opposite to Mark. I grew up in a non-Christian home, and at the age of 8 years old, I think it was 7, 8. My mum had read me a book, and I could really it was a Christian book, and I could really identify with the frustration of the author. The author had been paralysed. No, I've never been paralysed, but I was actually had a really quite severe hearing problem, and so I struggled to hear. So I related to the frustration that this young lady had. And then, cut a long story short, we walked past a church, saw they were advertising a showing of this lady's testimony. So I said to my mum, let's go to the church. We watched it on the big screen, what I think must have been like...
Tiny screen back then.
Tiny, like OHP or something, I don't know. But I thought it was really cool. And so I woke up the next morning and said, Mum, let's go to church. I want to go back there. And then I gave my life to the Lord. My mum gave her life to the Lord. That's how my walk began. What happened really quickly was, even though I couldn't physically always hear the people around me, I could hear the voice of the Lord. Not long after I gave my life to him, I could just, I'd pray and I'd hear him speak to me. And I just thought that was normal. I thought everyone could hear the voice of the Lord. And then I had a very kind of in and out relationship with family and with church. We moved to a village and we ended up going to this tiny church. Really, I was a teenager and I thought, this really sucks. I mean, it's just like dead compared to this Baptist church that we had been going to. And so I kind of walked away and And I started going out with this guy who was 10 years older than me. And I thought that was the answer to my dreams. I thought I could get out this kind of village lifestyle and He had a car, he had a house, he had, everything, I kind of wanted as a late teenager. And eventually married him, but he wasn't really walking with the Lord. We were going to church, but, he wasn't reading his Bible, he wasn't praying. I think the only reason he gave his life to the Lord was because I said, if you don't, I'm not going to marry you. Don't do that. Do not recommend that to anyone. So so that was like my green light. It was like, right, so I'm going to marry this guy and everything's going to be perfect. We're going to live happily ever after. Sadly, within 18 months, I was only got married at 19, so I would have just been like 20, 21. He had an affair. He'd had an affair before when we were going out, but he had an affair with his best friend's wife. What is really, affairs aren't recommended, but that's totally not recommended. And that didn't just obviously destroy his life and her marriage, but it absolutely destroyed me. I mean, destroyed me, rock bottom. Like, what have I done? Where am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? Just like everything. Crying out to God, desperately wanted him to come back, and everything was going to be all right, and we were going to carry on, and and came to Manchester in 2000, something to do with the Message Trust, and we were praying for like revival in Manchester and stuff in Manchester, and on the last, it was a
was a festival, wasn't it?
Yeah, Festival Manchester, where you had like big meetings in the evening in the MEN Arena, but during the day you would paint people's houses, do gardening, etc. What was not my cup of tea. And I camped for a whole week, and Simone did not camp. I went with my mum. We didn't even have a tent. We didn't have any supplies. We borrowed them all, and realised after 2 days of not having any cooking equipment that, the camping life was not for me. I remember the queues for the showers were so long that I was like, why would you do that? So I washed my hair under a cold water tap. But do you know what? I absolutely loved it. The Lord really moved. And then on the last day, it said, for those who are called to Manchester to come forward. So I went forward for an altar call, then came back to Suffolk where I was living. And sadly, life carries on. I was going back to work and etc. And I was in a prayer meeting in my then local church, and we were praying for a revival, and the Lord really spoke to me, and he said, I'm going to move in Manchester from the north, the south, the east and the west. And I was like, well, that's great, Lord, but I can't really pray that out as I'm in this tiny little place in Suffolk, and you're telling me you're going to move in Manchester. So I kept that in my heart. So then, being all eager, I was like, right, I need to go to Manchester. So I applied to a course with the Message in Manchester, their first ever kind of youth course that they were going to do, a young adult course. And of course I got turned down, because who would want a 20-year-old going through a divorce on their kind of first ever course? But that was just another rejection. It's slammed in my face. Obviously rejected from my love of my life at the time, and then rejected by the church. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to carry on. And then
so then you ended up at Roffey, didn't you?
People kept saying to me, oh, have you thought about going to Bible college? And I'm like, Bible college? They're just full of middle-aged ladies with flowy dresses. What is quite funny is I sit here with a long flowy dress and I'm middle-aged, but am I middle-aged? I think I am. But anyway, so I was like, no, Bible college is not for me. But eventually, after the third time, someone talking to me about going to Bible college, I thought I would apply. And I got a yes. I went down to the Sunday service, and the pastor interviewed me at the back of the church. Very informal, not what I was expecting. And he said, yes, we'd love to have you. And I nearly kissed the guy. I was like, that's not what you do. But I was just I couldn't believe that the church, a Bible college would have someone like me.
So that's how we kind of ended up meeting on the the second morning, because it's a residential college, we sat next to each other for breakfast, and we had this great conversation, and at the end of it, we both got up, and it'd all been about Manchester, because this is where God had called us. I was called to Manchester, Simone was called to Manchester, and it was like, initially we're all really excited, and we got up from the end of the table, and inside each of us, I was thinking, there's no way we want her in our church. Don't want her anywhere near our church.
And I was like, this guy is so super spiritual, like, you know, like, who does he think he is? He was really arrogant as well. Like I was like, no way am I going to his church in Manchester. So
anyway, so you can fast forward that. We obviously, God did something in our hearts. We ended up getting together, and we both came back to Manchester, and we then got into work. We were involved in the church. We were in leadership. I was a worship leader. We then Kingdom Faith Manchester then joined together with another church, World Harvest Bible Church, which had been planted by Pastors Matt and Julie Beamer. So that happened back in 2007. So
we had 3 children as well.
Yeah, we have 3 children. In all of that time, we've got 3 children. But the churches joined together, and we were always part of the leadership within the church in some capacity or another. But yeah, we just we got into life, and we were doing stuff, and I think on the outside, it probably looked like we were a great example family in the sense of we were in church, we were in leadership, we were ministry, we were doing stuff. We were being really favoured in our workplaces. I was working for a telecommunications company and God really opened major doors of favour for me, very senior management. And then suddenly in 2010, it kind of all shut. And I think it was the spiritual kick up the backside that we needed. Although everything looked great, we were just drifting along. And I think that was a really significant moment for us in our history in terms of God kind of getting us back and grabbing hold of us and going, right, I've got something more for you. I want you to be doing stuff, but you need to be connected to me more. So we went on a journey with that. And after about a year after I handed my notice in with the company I had been working for, I then came on staff with the church, oversaw all the administrative side of stuff for about best part of a decade, and then everything seems to be in decades actually when I look back at it. I never noticed that until just now, but anyway,
it's what happens when you get older.
Scary.
Yeah, no, don't say that. But yeah, I was involved in all the administration, and then in 2020, well, actually backtrack a bit from that, in 2019, and I'll dig into this a little bit later, but in 2019, I started RHEMA. We really felt it was important. The time at Kingdom Faith Bible College had been amazing. Mm-hmm. We were so blessed to sit under Pastor Colin Urquhart's ministry, work, go on ministry trips with him and do stuff and be taught by him. And it's such an incredible man of faith.
Yeah, the golden boy, you got to go on all the mission trips and all the stuff with Pastor Colin. I didn't go on.
You're still like jealous about that. But yeah,
20 years later.
Yes, if you want to pray for us at this moment, Toby.
It was a live-in Bible college, and it was 1 year for us, so it was a very intense time. But it was amazing.
It was incredible.
For myself, it was, there were a lot of people there who had gone because they wanted to be pastors or they want to be missionaries. There's a calling of the Lord on their lives. For me, I was like an absolute mess and was like, okay, I sink or swim. I've put all my eggs into one basket, and I just felt the Lord took me apart and put me back together again the way he wanted my life to be, and for him to be, we all do it where we can put people before the Lord, and I had put my desire to be married before the Lord, but I had gone to Bible college with my wedding ring, engagement ring on. I had very much believed, that I wasn't available, because when you do get guys and girls together in any situation, especially Bible college, we called it bridal college, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
So yeah, if you want to find a husband or wife, I highly recommend Bible college.
Signing up to RHEMA.
But no, Mark had I could see that there was a calling on his life, that one day he would be a pastor. I knew that. I think at Bible college, we had a warning. I had a warning. I don't know if you did, Mark, but I had this warning that you could then leave Bible college and then you just get on with your everyday life. And then before you know it, you can get too anointed people, and before you know it, you go into the workplace, and then you have children, and you get distracted, and then you're not really doing much with your life. Now, there's nothing wrong being in the workplace. There's nothing wrong being a parent. But are you seeing people saved in the workplace? Are you winning them to the Lord? Or, being effectively godly parents, effective godly parents to your children, etc. And like Mark said, we'd gone from this kind of high, and we were like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to just end up getting a job where you work,
drifting along.
Pay the bills, holiday once a year. But that's what we did, didn't we? We
did. And I think in 2008, Pastor Matt Beamer had brought prophetic word over our lives to do with our future being the destiny. Our destiny was in the house, and that God was going to move things around, and we would very quickly end up in a position of responsibility within the church. But also there was another part to that word, which was that we needed to get into the Kenneth Hagin teaching, the training, and learn from that. In order for it to unlock what God wanted to do in our ministry and in our lives later on. And I think, when you've travelled and had the opportunity to sit under the teaching of somebody like Pastor Colin Urquhart, who was like, Brother Hagin really in many ways, it's incredible, and you learn so much, and I'm so thankful for that time. But when we fast forward to 2019, and I really felt the Lord was saying to do RHEMA, and to do the course, and it was always going to be added into what God had already done in our lives through Kingdom Faith. But I loved it. The 3 years we had at the college, obviously COVID meant it started in person, then ended up online, so we had all that fun to go with. But actually I loved it because it has really added into and strengthened our lives, and brought sort of like some, almost, if you think of a house, the foundation and the pillars were all there, and it kind of added all the walls in some ways. It kind of added more strength and more detail to a lot of things that wasn't that we were without, but actually it really has helped us to grow. And I started in 2019. About a year and a half later, Simone started as well. So we overlapped. So for about 4.5 years, the house was doing RHEMA, which was a fun experience at times, a challenge, but one that's been a real blessing. Well, we're totally different, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm grateful for COVID, because we couldn't have. So I would drive Mark to Bolton and other places for him to do the RHEMA course, because it was in-house. Was it like every other Saturday, or
every 3 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, every 3 weeks. Yeah. And being, a mum of 3 children, I couldn't then be going at like all those Saturdays in a year. So during COVID, when it went online, I kind of had no excuse not to do it. Yeah. So it was like, right. And then you can always say, I don't have enough time. But I knew I needed to go that next level deeper. And it was going to be a challenge for me, because as I explained earlier about my hearing problem, so I missed like the first few years of my school. I was there physically, but I wasn't learning. They didn't realise. So everything I do is from memory. I don't sound out words properly. I don't know how to, I have no problem reading, but I really do struggle with writing, etc. You ask me to fill out a form and I'll run a mile. It's just not my
you don't run a mile. You run to me and give it to me.
Don't tell anyone. It's just not something that it's not something that excites me. So like a 3-year course kind of was like, really, is this what I want? It's what I want. I want the benefits from it, but am I willing to put the time into it and get a lot out of it? And it just added to, you can say, well, you've already been to Bible college, Simone. You went to a living Bible college, so why would you need to go to another Bible college? But we're on a journey of learning, and we should always be teachable. And we should always be willing to learn. You never arrive. Pastor Colin always used to say that, with his walk with the Lord, that you never arrive. And I used to sit there and think, what do you mean? There must be one day we're going to get to this level that we're going to arrive. And the more I walk with the Lord, and especially being a pastor, the more I realise you'd never arrive.
Well, it's like Paul says, isn't it?
Yes.
That as he gets further and further on in his ministry, it's almost like he knows less and less and less, and he's the worst of sinners and this and that. Yeah. And it seems to get worse and worse, and yet at the same time he's gone to such much greater levels. And it is like that, isn't it, with the Lord, that the more you get to know him, the more you realise how little you know of him, and it's like
less self and more of him, isn't it? You know, so RHEMA was perfect. To do the online RHEMA for me was really good, because I could do it. I was working another job, but it wasn't full time, so I would set aside. I would have to set aside double the time than anyone else as well, because I found it so hard. When the first few months, I was literally writing down word for word for word for word. So you imagine I'd have to pause it, then try and work it out, ask Google how you spell that. It would, like, for something that would maybe take someone an hour, it was taking me 2 or 3 hours. I quickly had to learn to adapt, because that wasn't doable. The more I put into it, the more I got out of it as well. And some of the teaching, I mean, but some of the lessons, like, what was that one that I said to you? I can't even say the word, let alone knew what it meant.
Hermeneutics.
I was like, what? What are you doing? Like, what?
How did I guess which one it was?
What was that even about? But it didn't matter that I couldn't spell it. It didn't matter that I couldn't spell it. It was what the Lord was doing through what I was learning and in my heart. So I definitely, there are no excuses, guys, not to do RHEMA. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Amen. And one of the things that I kind of picked up from what you were both saying there was that how often Pastor Matt gave you a word way back in 2008 or whenever you said it was, but within that word there was a qualification. And so often whether it comes through a word or what the calling that we sense that God's got on our lives, or just the desire that we have to do more for God, to do more with our life, almost always there's a qualification that comes with that.
Yeah.
And there's a requirement to go deeper with God. And I think that's what you guys are describing so well is that, you've done Bible school, you've been serving in the church for decades, kind of thing. It wasn't like you were, shy and retiring in terms of doing stuff for God, but yet there's a requirement to go deeper with God if you want to see more and allow God to move through you to a greater degree. And fast forward now, and you guys did RHEMA. I don't know if you knew when you started RHEMA that in 2024 you'd be picking out the senior pastor role at GoChurch, but was it good preparation for it? Yeah,
no, definitely. The answer to your question is, when I started RHEMA, I knew, well, let me qualify that. I thought I knew that this is where God was taking us to. So back in 2017, we were getting to a point where we kind of needed to make, Pascal and Claire was kind of chatting with us and chatting with me about, was I going to end up becoming more of like an executive, administrative pastor type person within the GoChurch network, or was I supposed to be more of like a lead pastor within a church? And kind of there was conversations around that kind of stuff beginning to happen. Church planting was very much on the agenda, like within GoChurch. It's all about church planting in terms of how we're going to grow and reach the lost, and so many amazing things that come of that. I knew I was never called to be a church planter. Mm-hmm. God had called us both to Manchester. So that always made the conversations really interesting, because it was a bit like, God's really going to have to speak to us about going to another location, because God hasn't laid that on our heart. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, having a willingness that if our leader said, I want you to go to somewhere else, well, okay, then we go in obedience to what our leaders say, and we honour and we submit to our leaders. So there was that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm wrestling with the Lord a bit, going like, but Lord, I don't think you want me anywhere else other than Manchester. So how will that work if we get sent? There's all these questions going around our minds. So in 2017, I went down to Kingdom Faith just to have a few days out away from the day-to-day, just go and spend some time with the Lord. Whilst I was there, God really clearly spoke to me I had like this most surreal 3 days whilst I was down there, where every person I spoke to ended up talking to me about like handover of leadership stuff. And I'm like, okay, what are you trying to say to me, Lord? And then God spoke to me, gave me a scripture which happened to be in our daily reading today, actually, from Jeremiah chapter 30, starts in verse 18. But it basically, by about verse 20, it says that your leader will be one of your own. Your ruler will arise from among you. And in that, I just knew God spoke to me, went, you're going to be the next pastors of the church in Manchester. So that's really exciting, also incredibly daunting, but really exciting. But what do you do with that word? Because I can't come back and share that with my pastor straight away. It's like, do you know what the Lord's told me? I'm going to be replacing you. Let's have that conversation, shall we? Doesn't work, that, does it?
This is part 1 of a 2-part episode series. Make sure that you're subscribed to us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you watch your podcast to catch episode 2. See you then. Thank you for joining us for the Ignite the Day podcast. We hope that we've ignited your day with revelation, inspiration, and encouragement, and that we're helping you to live the life that God has called you to.